President Trump said it directly. Bitcoin and crypto are very powerful. So many people want to pay in crypto. And while those words were coming out of the president's mouth, the oldest bank in America was quietly building the infrastructure to make it happen. Not with Bitcoin, not with Ethereum, with Ripple, with RLUSD, with the XRP ledger, BNY Mellon, over $50 trillion in assets under custody, the primary custodian of RLUSD, already onboarding Ripple Prime for tokenized deposits. And their CEO, Robin Vance, just went on the record and said the future of crypto runs through big banks. He's not speculating, he's describing what his own bank is actively building with Ripple right now. And that's just the beginning of what dropped this week. Because Franklin Templeton's head of digital assets just explained exactly when institutional demand for XRP explodes. Swift just announced a blockchain-based shared ledger for real-time 24/7 cross-border payments. And Evernorth just confirmed publicly that they're building institutional lending, collateral, and settlement infrastructure natively on the XRP ledger, not on Ethereum, not through wrapped tokens, natively on XRP. When you stack all of this together, what you're looking at is not a thesis. It's an execution timeline. And by the time most people realize what's being built, the positions will already be taken. Before we get into it, if you're watching this and you understand that the institutional migration into XRP is no longer theoretical, drop the word infrastructure in the comments. If you're still on the fence, drop watching. I want to see where this community's conviction sits right now, because the data I'm about to show you should settle the question permanently. Welcome back. I am the Calm Analyst. Around here, we don't chase headlines. We trace infrastructure. We follow the money. We connect the dots between what institutions are building and what that means for the asset you're holding. Today, we're going to walk through every major institutional signal that dropped this week, show you how they all connect back to Ripple and the XRP ledger, and explain why this convergence is unlike anything we've seen before in this market. This is not financial advice. This is institutional intelligence. Let's get into it. Let me start with the Franklin Templeton signal, because this is the one that most people heard but didn't fully process. Roger Baston, head of digital assets at Franklin Templeton, one of the largest asset managers on the planet, sat down and explained in precise terms how institutional demand for XRP scales. He said when firms start using the XRP network to solve business problems, to create efficiencies, to move records on-chain, that is when they decide to own more XRP in their portfolios. His exact framing was this. Once you start consuming the network, once you start using XRP to append records, you realize the total addressable market is massive, and therefore you want to own some of that XRP inside your overall portfolio. Think about what that means. This is not a speculative argument. This is an asset manager explaining the utility to ownership pipeline. Companies start using the XRP ledger operationally. They realize they need XRP to function on that network. That operational need converts into portfolio allocation. And as more companies go through that same pipeline, the demand compounds. Franklin Templeton launched an XRP ETF for this exact reason. They've been working with Ripple and the XRP ledger for years. Even during the SEC lawsuit, Franklin Templeton was doubling down with Ripple outside the United States. They didn't wait for clarity. They positioned ahead of it because they understood the thesis before most of the market caught on. And that's the pattern. The institutions that understand distributed ledger technology at an operational level are the ones buying XRP. The institutions that are still trying to figure out what blockchain does are the ones writing articles about whether XRP is dead. The gap between those two groups is where generational wealth transfers happen. If that distinction just clicked for you, if you just realized that the smart money isn't buying XRP because of price charts, but because of operational utility on smash that like button, this kind of analysis doesn't go viral on its own. Your like is what pushes it to the next person who needs to see it. Now let me connect the BNY Mellon signal because this is the institutional anchor that holds everything together. BNY Mellon is the oldest bank in America, over $50 trillion in assets under custody. They are the primary custodian of RLUSD. They are already onboarding Ripple Prime for tokenized deposits. And their CEO just publicly stated that big banks are the bridge between crypto and traditional finance. When the bank that holds the reserves for Ripple's stablecoin tells you they're the bridge between crypto and legacy finance, that is not a rumor. That is the CEO going on the record about what his institution is actively building. The bank that custodies $50 trillion in assets is telling you that Ripple's infrastructure is the connector between the old system and the new one. Now pair that with what Brad Garlinghouse disclosed about Ripple Treasury, formerly G Treasury, the company Ripple acquired. Last year, Ripple Treasury orchestrated $13 trillion in payments. 0 of those were through a stablecoin or crypto. 0. That's the opportunity, because the moment those treasury dashboards integrate the option to send payments through RLUSD, settle in 1 minute instead of 3 to 5 days, cost a fraction of what traditional rails charge, the conversion begins, not gradually. Client by client, payment by payment, as CFOs and treasurers discover that the stablecoin rail is faster, cheaper, and more transparent than everything they've been using for decades. Garlinghouse called it the ChatGPT moment for crypto. The moment when stablecoins become the entry point that pulls institutions into the broader blockchain ecosystem. And with $33 trillion in global stablecoin trades last year and a total addressable market heading toward $50 to $100 trillion, Ripple is positioned at the exact center of that transition. Now let me show you the SWIFT connection, because this is the one that ties the global banking system directly into the infrastructure being built around XRP. SWIFT just announced they're building a blockchain-based shared ledger for real-time 24/7 cross-border payments. Over 30 banks from 16 countries are designing it. And when you go through that list of 30 banks, 12 of them have confirmed Ripple partnerships. Societe Generale has EURCV on the XRP ledger. Ripple custody was tested with SWIFT for tokenized bond settlement. Santander's OnePay FX was built with Ripple. DBS signed a memorandum of understanding with Ripple for tokenized fund trading. Standard Chartered, Mizuho, MUFG, Bank of America, Westpac, Royal Bank of Canada, BBVA, UOB, ABSA, all linked to Ripple through payment networks, custody steering groups, and banking consortiums. No one is claiming there's a direct Ripple-SWIFT deal, but 12 of 30 banks working on SWIFT's blockchain ledger have Ripple on the other side of their infrastructure. That's not a theory. That's a pattern you can verify bank by bank. The architecture of the future is being designed by institutions that already know the XRP ledger inside and out. And SWIFT's CEO said it directly. Banks are ready for blockchain and are asking SWIFT to play a bigger role. The Clarity Act is approaching the president's desk. The SEC tokenization exemption is weeks away. The regulatory framework and the infrastructure are arriving at the same time. And the banks designing SWIFT's blockchain future are the same ones already partnered with Ripple. Comment below. Did you know that 12 of the 30 banks building SWIFT's new ledger have Ripple partnerships? Type new if you'd already connected those dots. Type new if this is the first time you're seeing the full picture. I want to see how deep this community's research goes. Now let me talk about Evernorth, because this is the catalyst that changes how you think about what XRP actually is. Because XRP started out as a payments token. That was the first use case. Trillions sitting in idle bank accounts around the world to make conventional international transfers possible. XRP can move that money in seconds for fractions of a cent. Everyone knows that story. But the reality is that XRP was designed for more. And Evernorth just confirmed it publicly. Tokenization, lending, collateral, settlement, one ledger, one asset doing the bridging. Their exact words. We believe no other network combines all of these capabilities natively with the level of regulatory clarity that institutions require. Evernorth holds 473 million XRP in institutional treasury. They're backed by Ripple, SBI, Pantera, and Kraken. They lend XRP, they deploy it into DeFi infrastructure, they're actively building the XRP ecosystem from the inside. And now they're pushing native XRP lending on the XRP ledger through the proposed XLS 66 amendment. Single asset XRP vaults, fixed term, fixed rate loans, automated repayments on-chain, zero knowledge proofs for confidentiality, no bridging, no wrapping, no custody risk. Institutions can deploy XRP liquidity without leaving the XRP ledger or relying on external smart contracts. XLS 66 is currently in the validator voting phase, needing an 80% supermajority to activate. Once it passes and holds at 80% for 2 weeks, it goes live. And when it does, the use cases multiply exponentially. Think about the total addressable market. over $1 quadrillion in derivatives, $400 trillion in real estate, $128 trillion in global stocks, $30 trillion in gold, $8 trillion in insurance, and that's just the beginning. When XRP can serve as collateral, as a lending instrument, as a settlement asset, and as a bridge, all natively on one ledger, the demand profile for the token changes fundamentally. This is not XRP as a speculation vehicle. This is XRP as institutional infrastructure. The difference between those two things is the difference between a 142 price tag and something that most retail investors would call impossible today. Subscribe right now if this is the kind of analysis you've been looking for. Hit the bell, drop it in the comments, because every week we go this deep, connecting the institutional signals that most channels don't even cover, when Evernorth's XLS66 goes live. When the Clarity Act hits the Senate floor, when the first major bank activates XRP lending infrastructure, you want to already understand the context. Now let me address the CBDC angle because something important is happening in Washington that directly benefits Ripple's positioning. Congress is pushing hard against central bank digital currencies. President Trump issued an executive order stating there shall be no CBDC. Fed Chair Powell confirmed the work has ceased and that the Fed does not believe it has the legal authority to issue a retail CBDC without congressional action. Now here's why that matters for XRP. If the Fed cannot launch a CBDC, the infrastructure for modernizing the American payment system has to come from the private sector. Someone has to build the rails, someone has to provide the settlement layer, someone has to bridge legacy finance and the new digital system. And who has spent the last decade building exactly that infrastructure? Who has 300 banks across 45 countries on their network? Who has BNY Mellon as their custodian? Who has BlackRock using their stablecoin as a settlement layer? Who has MasterCard in their partner program? Who just entered Singapore's central bank sandbox? Ripple. The answer is Ripple. And every legislative move that blocks a government-controlled CBDC is a move that strengthens the position of private sector infrastructure providers, especially one that already has regulatory clarity, institutional partnerships, and a stablecoin that the New York Department of Financial Services has signed off on. The Republicans who are blocking CBDCs are the same ones pushing for the Clarity Act, the same ones pushing for tokenization, the same ones who want the private sector to build the next financial system. And the company best positioned to build it is the one that's been building it for a decade, while everyone else was still debating whether blockchain was real. Now let me bring this all together. Because when you stack every signal from this week, Franklin Templeton explaining the utility to ownership pipeline, BNY Mellon declaring themselves the bridge between crypto and legacy finance, Swift building a blockchain ledger with 12 Ripple-partnered banks, Evernorth confirming native lending and collateral on the XRP ledger, Congress blocking CBDCs and creating space for private infrastructure, the Clarity Act moving toward passage, the SEC commodity classification already done, 7 ETFs live with $144 billion in inflows. When you stack all of that together, you're not looking at a speculative asset waiting for a catalyst. You're looking at the most comprehensive institutional build-out in the history of digital assets, all converging on a single ledger and a single token that is trading at 142 while retail argues about whether it's dead. The institutions are not confused. BNY Mellon is not confused. Franklin Templeton is not confused. The 12 banks building Swift's blockchain ledger are not confused. Evernorth is not confused. BlackRock is not confused. They are building, they are deploying, they are positioning, and they are doing it with the kind of capital and infrastructure commitment that does not get reversed. Being early feels exactly like being wrong, right up until the moment reality catches up. And when a $50 trillion custodian, the world's largest asset manager, and 12 of the 30 banks designing the future of cross-border payments all converge on the same infrastructure, reality is not far behind. Price is a distraction. Value is the reality. Structure is what matters. And the structure being built around XRP right now is the most institutional, the most connected, and the most inevitable build-out this market has ever seen. In a market fueled by emotion and noise, we thrive on data and composure. Remember, haste leads to loss, while calm analysis leads to victory. If you made it to the end of this one, you now have the full picture of what's converging on XRP from every direction: institutional custody, stablecoin infrastructure, tokenization, lending, settlement, regulatory clarity, global banking partnerships, and a legislative environment that's clearing the runway for all of it. Comment "Calm Analyst" below. Let me see who stayed for the entire breakdown, and share this video with one person who keeps asking you why you believe in XRP. Don't explain it yourself. Send them this. Let BNY Mellon explain it. Let Franklin Templeton explain it. Let the 12 Swift banks explain it. The institutions are doing the talking now. Like, subscribe, notifications on. I'll see you in the next one. Stay patient, stay rational, and as we always do, we don't wait for the future. We plan for it.